Nearly 1 in 3 Americans live in a county or parish hit hard by a weather disaster in the past 3 months. From the deadly fires in the Northwest to hurricanes in the South and Northeast to flash floods in Middle Tennessee, thousands of people are in need of food and shelter all across the country. And COVID-19 safety restrictions are adding an extra layer of stress and causing difficulties for shelters to provide enough room for those in need. Good evening. I'm Tammy Arender. Welcome to Rural America Live with AARP, and welcome to our listeners joining us on Rural Radio on Sirius XM Channel 147. You know, we have very little control over where and when disaster strikes, but how we prepare, what we do during a disaster, and how we stay safe after a catastrophic event could mean the difference between life or death. Tonight, AARP joins us to talk about how they can help when disaster strikes your community. And we have a special guest joining us from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA. He is here to take your calls, along with AARP to answer your questions and offer some life-saving tips. So let's go to our question of the month. Are you prepared for an unexpected natural disaster? Or maybe you have a tip to share. Also tonight, we are giving away a Yeti cooler to 5 lucky on-air callers. If you are caller 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10, you will be a winner. The phone lines are open, so give us a call, 877-283-7570. And you don't need to be a member of AARP or over 50. And as a reminder, you can win only once each calendar year. Join the conversation and give us a call, 877-283-7570. Now, if you are a winner tonight, AARP will call you back in the next few days to confirm your mailing address. So make sure and return their call, and you will get your Yeti cooler, but be patient. The pandemic has slowed down the shipping of those coolers. Well, joining me now from Edmond, Oklahoma is Sean Voskuhl, Director of AARP Oklahoma, and FEMA's Aaron Levy, Director of the Individuals and Community Preparedness Division, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Now, according to the National Weather Service, September 10th marked the climatological peak of the Atlantic hurricane season, but that means we're only halfway through the hurricane season, and there's a good chance we could still experience some very severe tropical storms or hurricanes over the next couple of months. Now, myself, being raised in Louisiana and having just returned from there, seeing firsthand that damage from Hurricane Ida, this show is so timely. Aaron, let's start with you. You have been with FEMA over a decade. What can you share with folks who are currently victims of such disasters?
Great. Well, first of all, Tammy, thank you and the folks at RFD-TV for having me on. So first and foremost, if you're in Louisiana or anywhere else in the country where there's been a major presidential disaster declaration, please go to www.disasterassistance.gov to register for assistance from FEMA. FEMA is in a position to provide you with immediate needs assistance, other needs assistance, such as making sure you get your basic needs. And if we can't help you, we're going to work with our partners in the volunteer community, such as those at the AARP or the American Red Cross or any other number of our national voluntary organizations active in disasters, to make sure we can get you the assistance you need and make sure we're putting you on a good path towards recovery.
Good advice. Now, what are the first steps that they need to take? Because we hear that there's a lot of documentation, a lot of things you need to do. What are their first steps to get that ball rolling?
Yeah, no, so Tammy, that's a great question. So one of the things I often say to people is, and I'm gonna put this in a little more context, is if you had to leave your home right now and you only had 60 seconds to leave your house, do you know where your insurance information is, where your driver's license is, where your checking account information is, where your credit card information is? So we'll probably talk about this later in the show, but making sure those key financial documents are organized before a disaster hits. And FEMA's got a lot of great low-cost tools that could help you do that. That's going to be a key for folks who are going to use National Preparedness Month, which is this month, to better prepare. But for folks who have been impacted, I would make sure you have as much of those documents with you as you possibly can as you go through the registration process. Our folks at FEMA are going to do everything that we can to work with you with what you have. We understand a lot of folks had to leave their houses rather quickly, specifically in some of those parishes in Louisiana and elsewhere with sometimes only the clothes on their back. But what I would tell them is that when you go to disasterassistance.gov and you begin that registration process, having your checking account information, your home insurance information, if you have flood insurance, your flood insurance information, it's going to make your recovery a whole lot faster.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of people may not really understand FEMA's role during response and recovery. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would love to. So I'm going to say something, it's kind of bold, but I want to be as candid as I can with your listeners. FEMA is not a first responder. We're not a first responder. I like to tell people whenever I'm going out in the country talking to folks that it's more likely that your neighbor or a local firefighter or a local police officer, what we call our emergency responders, they're going to be the ones to save your life. So this is what FEMA does. When the president grants a disaster declaration at the request of a governor, FEMA will do a couple of things. Number one, we're going to serve as the orchestra conductor of the federal response. When we go downrange to your state, wherever you might be in the country, we're there to support the governor and to make sure we're helping to fill his or her gaps in those capabilities at the state level. That's number one. Number two, when we get into recovery, specifically for individual Americans who register with FEMA and we're able to give them assistance, we're able to, again, give you basic funding for immediate housing needs, get you maybe into a hotel. We can maybe, God forbid, get you funeral assistance. We can also help with crisis counseling. But this is all, Tammy, in cooperation with the state. So the big takeaway here is, we're not a first response organization. We're just one part of the larger team. I think of FEMA as the orchestra conductor of the federal response. But at the end of the day, whenever you see FEMA in your states, we're there at the request of the governor to support the state's efforts. The best disasters are state-led, locally executed, and federally supported.
Right. Key word there, the support and helping the state government. You touched on this a little bit. Let's talk a little more specific about what types of assistance FEMA offers.
Great. So there's two types of assistance in the aftermath of a disaster. We have two programs. We have our individual assistance program, Tammy, which I've kind of touched on a little bit over these first couple of minutes. That is assistance that's designed to meet your uninsured needs. If for those of you listening out there in America, whether you're watching on television or you're listening on Sirius XM radio, there's one thing that you could take away is FEMA cannot make you whole again. We're there to meet some of those uninsured needs. So what does that mean? We can help get a roof over your head into a hotel. We can maybe help you, again, in partnership with the state, get you some unemployment benefits. We might be able to position to help you with crisis counseling. We can get you, God forbid, funeral assistance reimbursement. So those are the types of assistance that we provide individual Americans and their families. Now, we have a whole separate category of assistance, Tammy, which we call our public assistance program. And that's really multi-billions of dollars of aid, which we give directly to states to rebuild critical infrastructure. So, Tammy, you were saying you've been down in New Orleans or in the area in Southeast Louisiana. You're going to see those local governments working through the state, through Governor Edwards' people, seeking our reimbursement for repairs to bridges, roads, schools, water treatment plants, and most of all, especially in the aftermath of the hurricane, debris removal. But those types of funds and assistance, that really is directed towards the state. So that's, I think, how I would separate, in the aftermath of a disaster, the kinds of assistance that we can give both local and state government and individual Americans and their families.
All right, critical needs, all of those. Sean, I know AARP works closely with FEMA and other government agencies during natural disasters. You want to talk a little bit about that and maybe share some tips with us?
You bet. And what's really important is how do we plan for disasters? And I think we already heard that September 10th is that peak point for hurricanes. But September is National Preparedness Month, and so each week of the month, it's designed to help prepare you, and so you're not caught off guard during this difficult time for so many folks. So this week is about low cost, no cost things that you can do. And next week will really be about talking to young folks about being prepared. So it's important, whatever age you are, you need to be prepared for these disasters as they arise. And I think it's also really important to talk about a couple of items that you need. I know Aaron's talked a little bit about, if you need to leave in a hurry. And we really talked to folks about planning and the need for a go bag. And so I love that term go bag, but it's a good start for building one. And so we want people to feel really prepared and be able to have a bag to take with them in an emergency. And so let's talk about what would go in a go bag. And so I think we've got a graphic for that. So all those important documents Aaron talked about, including birth certificates, insurance, an extra pair of reading glasses would be very important, extra phone charging cables, and extra face masks since we're dealing in a pandemic. Emergency cash is extremely important because you may not have access to, going to get cash out of the bank and with electricity being gone and those types of things. So a go bag if you're planning to leave in a hurry. And the other important document and what we talk a lot about is your stay bin. And that's it if you're staying in. So you're needing to keep 2 weeks worth of goods. So what's real important for that? If you're staying in, sheltering in, bottled water, non-perishable foods. If non-perishable foods, make sure you have a can opener too. Pet food, flashlights, lanterns, lighters, candles, and firewood. And again, let me stress it. I can't stress enough. Remember your pets. Make sure you plan accordingly to make sure you take care of your pets as well.
Absolutely great advice. How do I know? And again, having lived in Louisiana and you hear that the storm's coming or disaster's coming, how do you know when to evacuate or when to shelter in place? I mean, if it's not mandatory, if the governor's not saying you have to leave, how do you know?
Yeah, Tammy, that's a great question. So what FEMA always says is that we defer to the local officials. So that local emergency manager or that local mayor, he or she is going to be the person to make the final decision, again, in concert with the governor about whether an area should evacuate. I wish there was a magic formula, but this is what I often tell my friends and colleagues. My best friend in the whole world is an emergency room doctor in New Orleans. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was texting with him. He has a wife. He has 2 kids under 5. And it was a really tough decision for him. But luckily, they had a generator. They had several days worth of water. They had a gallon per person. They had a 3-day food supply and a lot of things that Sean talked about: flashlights, first aid kit, extra batteries, those key documents. And if you feel that you are in a place to shelter in place and that you have the ability to do so, then we certainly recommend that you do that. But again, at the end of the day, oftentimes it is the decision of the local elected official, often a mayor or a county commissioner. And at the same time, it's very much a personal decision for you to make with your family.
Right. And a lot of folks do want to ride it out. I know in Louisiana, even South Louisiana, they really want to protect their home, and they feel like staying is how they do that, they really are helpless when it comes to this storm. So how should you prepare your home for hurricane season?
Yeah, Sean, I'm happy to take this one first, and I would love to get some more context from you. Absolutely. So, Tammy, one of the things that we always say is, I say, start outdoors. That's the first thing to do. Let's make sure that before a hurricane, that you're taking in a lot of that. You're taking in, if you have a barbecue, that you're taking that inside, not inside your house, but maybe inside your garage, number one. Number two, that you're tying down lawn chairs and lawn furniture and making sure that those are secure before a storm hits. Number three, let's get those gutters clean. Let's get piping cleaned, and let's make sure that water, as much natural water flow that your house and property can provide, that you're giving Mother Nature the opportunity to do its job. As in, like, if your gutters are clean, you're going to have a lot more of an opportunity to get that water drained than if they're not clean. And I've had a lot of people learn that the hard way. I've been downrange. I was in Florida after Hurricane Irma, literally standing in front of 2 houses right next to each other on the same street. One household owner cleaned his gutters. The other household owner did it. Well, they both had damage to their houses. The guy with the clean gutters, this is from personal experience, his house had a whole lot less flooding.
Wow.
So that's I would give. Yeah, it's simple things like that can really help. But oftentimes what causes damage to the home are projectiles from outside the home. So doing what you can to tie those down and get those as far away as possible from your residence, especially those windows, it's going to be a help once that storm starts hitting.
Right. Got to think about that. Sean, anything you want to add?
And I think Aaron has some great principles, especially for folks that are listening in on that farm and ranch. How do you take care of your livestock during these storms? And many times, if you have a large herd of cattle or horses, you can't, move them out of state. You may have enough time to try to do that, and you'll need to talk to your state veterinarian official about transportation. But again, make sure those pens are clean. Is that area prone to flooding? You may have to let the cattle or horses out so they can get to higher ground and hopefully be able to get them once that happens. But think about your livestock as well. The United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, is another extremely important agency for loss for livestock and crops, in addition to any private crop insurance and insurance through the USDA.
Very, very good tips. And we would love to hear from you. We want you to join the conversation. Do you have a story? Do you have a tip to share? Maybe you have a question. You can give us a call at 877-283-7570, and you can join us. And we're going to take a short break. But first, here are some tips on how to prepare before disaster strikes.
A natural disaster may force you to evacuate, and the coronavirus could impact your emergency plans. So take steps now to help your family and community prepare. Keep a supply kit stocked with cloth face coverings, disinfecting supplies, and hand sanitizers. Check with local officials about what shelter spaces will be open during quarantine efforts. And remember to review the CDC's guidelines with the whole family. Disasters won't wait. Neither should you. Visit ready.gov/plan to make a plan today. And welcome back. I'm Tammy Arender. This is Rural America Live. Well, how do you prepare for disaster? Do you have a tip to share? Do you have a question about what to do after a natural disaster? We want you to join the conversation. Give us a call at the number you see on the screen, 877-283-7570. We also have Yeti coolers to give away to 5 lucky on-air callers. If you are caller 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10, you will be a winner. Good luck to you. All right, we're going to check back in with our guest tonight and talk about what we can do to prepare for disaster before disaster strikes. Sean or Aaron, who wants to address whether or not you call a professional contractor? Do you need to go to that level before a disaster strikes?
So Tammy, generally, for personal preparedness for yourself and for your family and for your pets, there's so much that you could do on your own. And I know one of the things I think Sean and I both touched on tonight so far is this idea for this National Preparedness Month about low-cost preparedness. I was just home in upstate New York visiting my mom this past weekend, and what I realized, that it's kind of sad, she's the mother of the Community Preparedness Director at FEMA, she didn't have a go kit. So one of the things that we were able to do was literally just to go through her medicine cabinet as well as her pantry, and I was able to put her together a go kit with her medicines, water, food, first aid kit, masks, because again, I know as Sean said, we're still very much in the midst of a pandemic, all at low cost. And again, some of the things that we talked about cleaning your gutters. Again, if you're able-bodied and you're able to get up there, that's something else you could do on your own. Making sure that you're able to put away some of those outdoor equipment that you want to make sure that won't get involved with wind blowing very hardly. But there is a lot of stuff that you could do on your own. FEMA, we generally don't, condone or recommend a specific company. But what I would say, especially in hurricane-prone states, especially maybe for some of your listeners listening at the Florida Panhandle, there are numerous companies that do provide homes with like hurricane-proof windows, hurricane-proof doors, shelters, other things along those lines. So I would say step one, see what you could do on your own for low to little to no cost. And then step two, assessing really your own risk, depending on where you live in a rural community or elsewhere, then make a decision about whether or not you need to call a contractor.
All right, good advice. We do have a caller tonight. We have Alan from Georgia. Alan, what's your question?
My question is, in the event of a disaster, how many days or what response time is it before a family can get help?
So, Al, that's a great question. Every disaster is different. Al, what we like to say is we recommend that you be prepared with enough water and food and other basic necessities. Some people say 3 days. I think as the Director of Community Preparedness at FEMA, I would tell you 5 days. So much of this depends upon the capabilities of your local government, how well prepared your community is, steps your community has taken to strengthen the infrastructure around where you live against flooding and wind damage. But generally at FEMA, what we generally tell people is you should be prepared for at least 3 to 5 days of being able to sustain yourself and your family before officials can get to you in a worst case scenario.
Good question. Alan, thank you for calling in. Let's go to Florida next. Kevin, what's your question?
Yes, I do a hurricane preparedness starting May 1st to our residents in the city, and I get FEMA, I get the Red Cross and local police department and fire department talk about the safeties, everything else, and maybe it's a good idea for anybody around the country get the citizens involved about different things.
Good advice. Absolutely. We've got to come together as a community, especially when it's times like that. And by the way, Kevin, congratulations. You're our first Yeti winner tonight. Thank you
Tabby,
for joining. Yeah.
Might I comment on what Kevin said? Because this really struck my heartstrings a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe Sean might want to say something too. So Kevin, I have to tell you, man, we at FEMA and with our partners in local and state government, with nonprofits and others, I can provide tools, directions, training, games, and other things for youth to get youth involved in preparedness. But Kevin, what you're doing in your community, bringing community members together from FEMA, local government, voluntary organizations, firefighting organizations, local representatives of the U.S. Department of Agriculture if you're in a rural community, and other rural stakeholders. That is what is going to make your community safer. It's local citizens all across this country coming together to talk about what their risks are, what capabilities they can bring to the table to help prepare for a disaster and respond. So Tammy, I appreciate you let me jump in there, because I think what your last caller just said, that is the type of citizen that we need. If we had more Kevins, I think his name was, all around this country would be a lot more resilient.
I agree with you. Sean, anything you'd like to add?
it's perfect. I think Aaron hit on the nail head, and I think that's what's real important about the volunteer organizations and making sure that you're involved with that and knowing what resources are out there. So I know Florida would probably have a very active VOAD program, and so they may be a great resource for you to have come in and speak as well.
Absolutely. Kevin, thank you so much for all you do. We do want to give that number again. If you would like to call in, ask a question, share a story, that phone number 877-283-7570. We have another caller now. We have William from Oregon. William, what's your question?
Hi. Hey, I just had a comment. A lot of people get caught up in a disaster and they're rushing around to grab their stuff and go. But it's amazing how many people forget to grab prescriptions. So try to get an extra amount of prescriptions with you to take with you, or to even the people with on oxygen that are either for breathing or for sleep apnea. They need to plan ahead for some way to have a power source to keep that air supply for those people.
William, that is great advice. And can I ask you, while we have you on the phone, are you anywhere near any of those dangerous fires?
Well, no, not this year. They've been more down the south. 4 years ago, we had the railroad tankers, the oil tankers, exploded right here in our little town. Yeah, it made the national news. But that's when all of us had to leave our part of town for like 3 days. But it's amazing to hear how many of the stories of the people that ran off and forgot prescriptions and stuff. So that's what made me think of that. Our town was saved. We didn't burn to the ground, luckily. I mean, it could have been real bad. But we've escaped the fire so far this year in our area. We've been real fortunate.
All right, William. Well, thank you so much for calling in and for that tip, because that is a great reminder. You know, I have a question about that, though, because I do like my mom always had a bag full of prescriptions. But how do you get extra to take with you? I mean, do you call the pharmacy, you call your doctor and say, hey, we know a storm's coming or a fire's coming? Because these days it's kind of hard to get those prescriptions refilled till that time is ready.
Well, you can also get 90-day supplies of your prescription drugs. And a lot of times your pharmacists will give you that next month, because a lot of times your prescriptions are filled for the year. But a lot of people do the 90-day as well.
All right, good deal. Wanted to know that they could definitely get that done and be prepared, because you're right. If you were dependent upon that medication, you need that with you as well. Let's talk about the pandemic and how it has impacted FEMA's response to all of these disasters.
Yeah, no, Tammy, that's a great question. And again, speaking about the pandemic, I know our administrator, Deanne Criswell, has been saying this on all throughout this month and ever since she took office several months ago. For all of your listeners out there who have not gotten vaccinated yet, again, for yourselves, for your loved ones, for your families, for your children, I would strongly encourage you to do so. But on that note, Tammy, I have to say FEMA has risen to the occasion. My colleagues have been working nonstop for the last 2 years. And we've been very lucky that we have such a dedicated workforce, but as well as dedicated partners in alphabet super federal agencies at the state level and the local level. And I can tell you, and I can tell your listeners and everybody else, that FEMA has met the challenge of the pandemic. Just this last couple of months, we took the lead in the beginning of this calendar year in helping to get over 200 million shots in arms in various community vaccination centers all around the country. We've provided millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in reimbursement to state governments for them to be able to get shots in arms for their citizens. And on top of that, we've also reimbursed state and local communities for millions of dollars of various supplies and testing equipment that they have shelled out money for to help keep their citizens safe and help get them vaccinated. But overall, Tammy, I'm proud to say that FEMA has continued to meet its traditional mission in helping communities prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters.
All right, that is good to hear. Sean, anything with AARP and how the pandemic has impacted your organization in helping folks?
There's no question the pandemic has gotten our attention, and we've ramped up our community education and outreach regarding vaccinations. When you think about the pandemic and COVID-19, 95% of all the deaths of from COVID-19 have been people 50 years of age and older. So we have a strong commitment to provide education and resources. We've held countless telephone town halls with physicians, postcards. We've done a lot of Q&As with so many individuals trying to get that information out, and working with a lot of state officials and making sure that we prioritize the older population. And early on, I think we've done a good job, especially the 65 plus vaccination, even in some of our more rural states and southern states that are a little bit behind. Our focus lately has been problems with unvaccinated staff in long-term care facilities. Like, this is my state, it's only about 50%. And we talk about that 75% threshold for people to get vaccinated. And so a lot of states, especially long-term care workers, aren't quite there where we need to be. And we're seeing a surge in long-term care facilities. Again, not only the general population, but we still have a lot of work to do. But we are seeing those numbers of more folks getting vaccinated ticking upwards. So, but we got to really work on those long-term care facilities.
Right, definitely so. Let's talk a little bit about, and we're going to actually, let's go to a phone call first, because I know, Celeste, you've been holding. So I've got a question on the tip of my tongue, but let's go to Celeste from North Carolina. What's your question this evening?
I know that we have documents that are stored safely, but if we are away from home when there is a disaster, and let's say the home is completely destroyed, we're at the point in our lives where we like to travel, and we may not have those documents on hand. Is there a database? Is there a digital platform where we could save or copy these documents to where, no matter where we are in the world, we would be able to access them in an emergency?
Excellent question.
Sean, I'm sorry, Tammy. Sean, I love a good visual prop, man. I appreciate that. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean in a second. But, man, first of all, Celeste, I'm proud that I am happily married for over 10 years to a fellow North Carolinian. It's always great to see North Carolinian call into the show. Celeste, we have, I think, something that could be very helpful to you and your family. It's called the Emergency Financial First Aid Kit, or EFAC, Emergency Financial First Aid Kit. It's at ready.gov, www.ready.gov. And Celeste, this is a kit that it's both physically on paper. It could also be uploaded right to your phone or saved on your hard drive, where you could literally take that key information from all those documents that you've locked up in a safe, your insurance information, your driver's license, credit card information, banking information, photographs of key documents such as maybe your last will and testament, birth certificates, marriage certificates, and it provides a form and an online capability for you to save those. So I'm confident that the EFAC, or the Emergency Financial First Aid Kit, is exactly what I think you and your husband or your family need to help make sure that you have copies of those documents readily available, especially as you're enjoying this chapter of your life and you're traveling a lot.
Good advice. Sean, anything to add?
No, I think Aaron covered it well.
You're like me. Yeah, I'm like, you got to take a picture of everything. I have it. I got to take a picture of everything. All right, we're going to stay in North Carolina. Deanne's on the line. Deanne, what would you like to say tonight?
Hello. My question and my comment has already been addressed in the previous call about AARP putting out something that, that we can be reminded about our things, that we need to keep them in order at all times. So I just want to say God bless the one that's been in the storms, and imagine all their papers and things that have been lost. So I appreciate your program. I always listen every time I can. So good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanne. That's so sweet. We do appreciate your prayers. I know. How sweet is that, thinking about others. Now we're going to go to Florida and talk to Karen, who happens to be a winner. She's one of our Yeti winners tonight. Karen, what's your question?
It was more not exactly a question as much as of a comment. I found on home preparedness, instead of putting towels by my windowsills and by my doors, I went out and I purchased disposable baby diapers. Because if I evacuated my house and then I came back and there's no power, how do you wash the towels? How do you dry the towels? So it was much easier to just get a garbage bag, and if the diapers were wet from absorbing the water, just throw the diapers into the garbage bag and put it out by the curb and hope the sanitation workers would come and collect it.
How clever is that? That is worth staying up late for tonight, right? That tip right there alone.
I told you we'd learn something new.
You did. You told me at the beginning of the show you will learn something new tonight, and we did. Karen, thank you so much for sharing that story, because that's going to help somebody the next time, definitely. Guys, one of the questions I had, because as you know, we really lift up our farmers and ranchers and try and help them out, and during these storms, and we have just seen some amazing video out of Louisiana, ranchers having to move their cattle, move their livestock. Any advice for how they prepare ahead of time for a natural disaster?
We talked about it a little bit earlier on, and I just, it's great that we do have the technology to give us weeks, maybe days, up to a week to prepare. We know that there's a hurricane coming. It's a little harder when you got tornadoes like in Oklahoma. But, I think it's important finding that higher ground when you're talking about flooding. And if you're not in an area, can you get them moved in a quick amount of time? If you got to keep them in pens, making sure you don't have a lot of troughs and things that can be washed around, that can drown from it. But it's finding that higher ground. And sometimes you just got to open the gate, and they have to use their survivor skills to find higher ground. Right,
just make sure, they're tagged, and they have a survival instinct in them, for sure. We'd love to hear from you. I'm sorry, Aaron, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I apologize, Tammy. No, thank you. So I would just add one thing, especially to your rural viewers. Please, if you haven't already, sign up for alerts from the emergency notification system. I put my phone down in the other room. I know my colleagues have been holding theirs up, but a lot of your iPhones, if you have them these days, those emergency alerts are built in. But our counterparts at NOAA, who really do a great job on weather reporting. They have a NOAA emergency radios, which you can also download on your phone. But most of all, if you sign up for your local or state emergency notification system, it's a great way, especially if you're in a rural community, to really be able to get up-to-date information on what the status is of a tornado or hurricane or whatever threat you might be facing. So, Tammy, sorry to interrupt you, but I did want to put in a plug right there that no matter where you are in the country, where you live, signing up for emergency notification system alerts is super important.
Absolutely. You can interrupt me anytime. We do want you to be part of the conversation as well. So that phone number, once again, 877-283-7570. Comment, question, story, tip. We're here, and the experts are here to answer your questions and give you advice. On another topic of safety, the generator. Okay, for those who have lived through hurricanes and been without power for weeks on end, that's the first thing you go buy after your first one. But there is a danger involved with that, isn't it? Talk about safety in using generators.
This is one of my favorite topics. I was hoping you or somebody was going to ask me about this. So, folks, let me give you some quick tips. Please, number one, keep your generator at least 15 feet away from your home, at least. I would encourage you, if possible, to keep it north of 20 feet. But if depending on like the size of your property, please at least keep it 15 feet. That's number one. Number two, please keep it dry. I know that's easier said than done. We often recommend that you take the generator out after the storm has passed and that it's not outside getting drenched and collecting water. So please keep the generator dry. Number three, this is something that I actually learned very recently, folks, from a very dear friend of mine who's a colleague at the Department of Energy. I just learned this a couple of weeks ago. When you're hooking a generator up into your home's power system, you actually want to make sure you shut off the power flow from your traditional power source, because what we don't want to see happen, and this could be very dangerous, especially for electrical workers in the aftermath of a storm, utility workers trying to get power back online, as you're sending power in from the generator into your home, you don't want that power to go back out into the grid, back out onto the lines. That could be extremely dangerous for your utility workers. And I think the first thing that I would say is, and please, do not plug your generator into an outlet inside your house. I have no personal experience with this, but having been downrange after disasters, heard a couple of stories, seen one house in particular where they actually plugged the generator into the inside of the house where there was apparently power in a socket, caused a fire. The house made it through the storm, burned down because of poor generator usage. We want to avoid that. So 15 feet at least away from the house, keep it dry. Make sure that you shut off, there's no power coming in, but the flow of power in from your normal source. And finally, please do not plug it into any outlets or sockets inside the house.
Right. Oh, my goodness. Yes, we have heard horror stories of what has happened. When people have generators, though, and big trucks, heavy equipment that they don't need, like I know a lot of folks in North Louisiana help out those folks in South Louisiana. How do you do you go through FEMA if you want to go in and help out a community that has suffered a disaster?
So, Tammy, Sean, one of the things that we say is cash is king in the aftermath of a disaster. I know what are the great things about this country. One of the things I love about being American and love about living in this country and love about serving the people of this country at FEMA is that all of us want to help a neighbor or a community in need, even help a total stranger in need. But if you have the ability, sending money to those national voluntary organizations active in disasters, you can go to nvoad.org, is a great way to help your fellow Americans out in the aftermath of an event. The other thing you could do is very much get involved. There are these wonderful local volunteer emergency managers. They're called Cert Teams, or Community Emergency Response Teams. You could probably literally just Google CERT and your home state. These are generally run by local fire departments or local emergency management agencies, sometimes even at the state level. And believe me, if you have generator capability, if you have diesel fuel capability, if you have hauling capability, if you have the ability to make meals, if you have the ability to provide large supplies of water, those local community emergency response teams are going to be a great way for you to plug in to those existing volunteer organizations that are active. And last thing I'll say, in some areas you do have some folks, I know Tammy down your way, the Cajun Navy. I love those guys and gals. They are, true volunteers in their heart. You do a great job marshaling resources. So I know, especially if you're in the Louisiana, Texas area, finding ways to hook up with the Cajun Navy is a great way to do it. But again, number one, cash is the best. If you want to help out, give a donation to one of those volunteer organizations active in disasters. 2, see if you can get active in your local community emergency response teams. Or 3, look for organizations such as the Cajun Navy in your area who might be looking for volunteers.
All right, good advice. We have John from Colorado on the line. John, you have a question or comment? John, can you hear me? I think maybe
John.
I still thought I heard his. All right, I think now we're going to go to California. John, hopefully you can call back. Barbie from California. All right. Unfortunately, maybe some phone trouble tonight, but don't hesitate to try back, okay? With that phone number, 877-283-7570. Let's talk about something that our biggest fear during these times, scams that follow these disasters, because there are people out there who will take advantage of these folks going through such a difficult time. Both of you can address this. Aaron, let's start with you. What scam should we be aware of, and what does FEMA do when a disaster strikes like that?
All right. Yeah, folks, I'd love to get Sean to jump in on this one as well. From a FEMA perspective, let me say a couple of things. FEMA will never ask you for money to help you out. That's the first thing I want you to know. That's number one. Number two, if somebody comes to your door claiming to be from FEMA, even if they have a shirt like mine on, ask them to see their badge. Mine looks just like this. It should look something like this, like a government identification. So even if they're coming to your door, I know we have disaster assistance teams that get out into the field as quickly as we can. We often go knocking on doors, door to doors, to offer people assistance. So I can't stress that enough. Like if they say they're from FEMA, even if they have a shirt on, please ask to see their badge. And the last thing I would probably say is that don't trust anyone who's calling you sometimes in those immediate aftermath and they're asking for money. No volunteer organization active in disaster, no nonprofit organization, no state level emergency manager or local emergency manager is going to ask you to hand over money for them to get services from them on a volunteer basis in the aftermath of a storm. So I would really encourage all those folks to take those steps. We'd love to hear what Sean has to say too from the AARP perspective. Great partners.
Yeah, Sean?
And I think Aaron hit it on the nail about imposter scams, but we also need to think about contractor scams. Those individuals that come in, roofers, folks that claim they're just down the street, they're working on this house. If they're asking for money up front, that's a red flag. Check in with the insurance department, your insurance agency, and do not give money to anyone that's putting the pressure on you that you're in the neighborhood. They can do it right now. Just give me some money and we'll get your roof fixed or other repairs that you may have. So contractor fraud's a really big important part. You can also check with your Secretary of State's office to make sure they're registered to do business in the state as well. And your state attorney general is very good to work with on that as well. At AARP, we have the Fraud Watch Network that kind of tracks and gives you some really tips of what you can learn about it. We also have a helpline that's available for folks who think they've been victims of scams and frauds. But unfortunately, when disasters happens, it tends to bring a lot of scammers out there, and then they're the worst kind.
They do. They know when and where to strike, for sure. Let's go next to North Carolina and Linda. Linda, what's your question or comment tonight? Linda, you there?
Oh, yes, I'm here. I just wanted to bring up the issue that ties into a couple of things that were just talked about. The contractors, if you live in a wooded area at all, it's good to maintain a safety landscaping thing where you don't have tall trees hanging up that might fall over and go into your house, or if they're a big tree way away from your house and they get struck by lightning. I had a tiny pine struck. The lightning went down to the root that hit the water line that came into the house and blew up a gigantic maple tree that has finally died. But I called the Forest Service over because I didn't want to take all those trees out, and they said they had seen people blown out of their shoes standing in the house near the sink or the bathroom. But just be aware of the foliage that's around you, because it won't only maybe block the road and not touch you, but it may come right through your house. I've learned that a couple of times since being up here, and I think that's a good thing to just keep in mind. And I wasn't expecting this program, and I have a freezing of the brain right now too, which will happen if you have to think fast and get out. Like what you're talking about.
It is.
So.
It is. Linda, thank you so much for sharing that story.
Linda talked about something that's really important, and Aaron probably knows about as well. Once there is disaster, there's a lot of faith organizations that are part of BOADs that have a chainsaw crews that go out and help clear brush, and they're free. So there's a lot of great resources that if you connect to the right folks.
Definitely. All right, we're going to take a short break, and we do have another Yeti cooler to give away, so give us a call. That number, 877-283-7570, 877-283-7570, and you might just be a winner. We'll be right back.
We've talked about what to do before and during a natural disaster, but do you know what to do after disaster strikes? Did you make a plan? After disaster strikes, if you do nothing else, you need to do these 4 things. First, let friends and family know you're safe. Register yourself as safe on the Red Cross Safe and Well website. Second, if you evacuated, return only when authorities say it's safe to do so. Third, Continue to listen to local news or a NOAA weather radio for updated information and instructions. Fourth, you should take pictures of home damage, both of the buildings and its contents for insurance purposes. Both the American Red Cross and Ready.gov websites have great information to help you stay safe, prepare, and plan for a natural disaster. And for more disaster prep tips, visit AARP.org.
Welcome back to Rural America Live with AARP. We still have a Yeti cooler to give away, so let's go straight to the phone lines now. Next up is Barbie from California. Barbie, what's your question or comment?
Well, it's Bobby, but I have a comment. I've lived in the Sierra Mountains up here and in a small town, just outside of a small town, about 15 miles away, and we have had many natural disasters here. Windstorms. We had a tornado last year in January that tore the place up, and it didn't have a drop of rain in it, but it was a dry tornado, but it was definitely a hurricane. It was over 100-mile-an-hour winds. It was terrible, and it just about took out everybody had damage in the area, everybody. And trees came down, and the electric was out 8 days. Now, I was noticing their comment about the electricity being, you need to prepare for 3 to 5 days. I would say, especially if you have children or a lot of pets or even 2 or 3 pets, you need to have preparation for at least 2 weeks, because you don't know what's going to happen. Even after 8 days, we had problems with electric going on and off because of having...
Did we lose you, Bobby? Well, Bobby, thank you so much for calling in and sharing that story. I mean, that you talk about a range of things that are happening with weather and natural disasters, and it can leave you homeless, it can leave you without electricity, but we appreciate you sharing that story. Let's go back to North Carolina and Lizzie. Lizzie, what's your question or comment?
If you have mandatory evacuation and the person doesn't choose to leave and it really gets bad, how do you go about rescuing them?
Lizzie, thanks for the question. So that, as I heard me say maybe at the beginning of the show, if you were listening, Lizzie, that's really going to be up to the local emergency manager, local fire department, local search and rescue capabilities, and your local police department. What generally they will do is, as soon as it is safe, I know, Tammy, you said you were down there in the aftermaths of Ida. As soon as they can get and we can get resources into the area, whether that's helicopters flying overhead, or in some cases we've even started to use drones so we can get that first eye from a bird's eye view on top of places that have been damaged. They're going to do everything that we can to try and get in to save those folks who weren't able to evacuate or chose not to evacuate. So what people generally do, prioritize it based upon sort of the impacts, the areas, the capabilities we can bring to bear. But I always say that if your local elected official is telling you to evacuate and they're ordering a mandatory evacuation and you have the means and the ability, then you most certainly should evacuate or at the minimum, at least find your way to a shelter.
Very good. Thank you, Aaron. Our final caller tonight, Carla from Kansas, who is our final winner of the Yeti Cooler. Carla, very quickly, do you have a question tonight?
Yes, I have a question. How do you prepare for pets and also farm animals, and how long?
I'm not.
Guys, did we get the question?
I don't know if it's about communicating during a disaster or not. But I think, Aaron, you may want to say something here. But when we talk about that, you may not be able to use your phone to communicate during a disaster or after a disaster. So texting would be very important to learn if you don't know how to do that. That may be your only form of communication. To make sure in your communications plan, you know what loved ones, friends, or neighbors you're going to contact. But you may need to rely on texting to get your messages through.
That is good advice. I didn't realize that as well. I'm sorry, Aaron, because that was definitely a situation I had when I was in South Louisiana. Guys, we got about 90 seconds left. Aaron, let's start with you. How do you contact FEMA? What are your final thoughts?
Sure, a couple things. So for preparedness, go to www.ready.gov. You'll have a variety of low-cost, easy ways to build a kit, make a plan, and there's things we didn't get a chance to talk about this hour. Figure out ways to get your young children, grandchildren, nieces and nephew involved to prepare. We have a great suite of youth preparedness tools. And I think the last thing that I'll leave the viewers with and the listeners who are here tonight, buy flood insurance. I have something to tell everyone. If it rains where you live, it can flood. So please reach out to your people who provide your home insurance, and please look into buying flood insurance, because what a lot of homeowners learn, Tammy, is that their homeowner's insurance policy often does not cover, if it covers at all, damage from water, especially in the aftermath of hurricanes and other flooding events.
Right. Thank you. Sean, you got 30 seconds, my friend.
Really quickly, a lot of state offices like Louisiana have some great resources you can access. Go to states.aarp.org. And we'll have a great list of information and resources and people you can contact during disasters before, after, and during.
You guys have just been a wealth of information tonight. Thank you so much for joining us here on Rural America Live with AARP. And don't forget to join us October 21st when economic expert Chris Farrell joins us. Woo!
Aaron did good.
Oh, you guys did great. You guys did great.